this is from the team, just letting you know that the circus just left town.
So Jenna, first of all, a pleasure it is to meet you. I've been looking forward to this. I'll get the fanboy stuff out of the way. I am a fan. Funnily, funnily enough, because of Terrifier, that's how kind of I discovered you. So we'll get my little excitement out of the way with. Congrats on the new film, Faceless After Dark. I caught it
Thank
last
you.
night, so it's still fresh in my memory, and I have to say I
Amazing.
really enjoyed it. I
Thank you.
loved. You're welcome, and thank you. I loved, and I don't want to spoil anything for anybody that hasn't seen it. I loved how it kind of flips from one thing to something completely different halfway
Yes.
through. And I found myself thinking a little bit about Promising Young Woman as well. Just kind of
Hmm.
had that kind of feel to it. So um, when I first read the synopsis for this movie, I felt a big smile spread across my face because I thought it was a wickedly smart idea. Um, but as I understand it, when Raymond Wood, your director, first approached you with this project, it was a less than enticing opportunity from your point of view. So I just wanted you to
Yes.
maybe um, tell us a little bit about how kind of those early discussions went and how you ultimately addressed the elephant-sized clown in the room.
That's a horrifying image. I hate the idea of a clown the size of an elephant, or a bunch of clowns stacked on top of each other in an elephant costume. I'm gonna have nightmares about that. First of all, thank you for all of your kind words about me and about the film. I really appreciate it. I appreciate your time. And it's funny that you mentioned Promising Young Woman, because once we finally figured out what the film was going to be, my pitch for it was, what if Travis Bickle from Taxi Driver were the protagonist of Promising Young Woman? So you're right. You're right on the money. And then to answer your question about how it came to be, it's and it sounds like you already know a little bit about this story. Which I love the way you worded it. That's very funny. Yeah, one of the original investors came to Ray, the director, and said, if you can make a killer clown movie, if you can make a movie where I can put a killer clown on the poster, I'll fund it. And so Ray came to me because he was familiar with. I mean, we had been working together and friends for a really long time, but he was also familiar with Terrifier. And like you said, I wasn't super enticed about the idea of running away from clowns my entire life. I, can run away from lots of other things too. So I wasn't immediately enamored of the idea, but I approached Todd Jacobs, who was my co-writer at the time, and we basically said, okay, what's the version of this that's subversive, and what's the version of this that's either new or doing something old in a new way, and what's the version of this where we can kind of do something meta that we actually really enjoy and have fun with. And somehow we got here.
Obviously, you mentioned Todd Jacobs, your co-writer on this movie. How was your collaboration with him? Was it kind of full of the usual kind of creative differences, or was it a really kind of easygoing sort of relationship? And which one of you is the David Bowie fan?
We both love David Bowie. I think that was actually Todd's idea. And I don't remember where he got it from, but the reason I stuck to it and really enjoyed it is because of David Bowie's, I mean, obviously his impact as an artist, but also the way in which he subverted gender and gender performance and gender identity, and the ways in which he had his own ideas about how he was going to show up as an artist in the world versus the box that many people tried to put him in. So that was that's why I love that sort of nod. And to answer your question, it wasn't all smooth, to be diplomatic. We definitely bumped heads. I mean, it happens with any sort of creative even Ray and I have bumped heads. Like it's not about finding people, in my opinion, it's not about finding people that you don't bump heads with. It's about finding the people that are willing to work through it with you together, and who don't give up on prioritizing what the project needs to be rather than their own egos and just being right or going with your idea, like what serves the story the best. So there were certainly, some speed bumps in the process, but And we do have very different styles. I'm very organized and I'm very meticulous. Some people would say anal, but I don't think that's as nice of a way to put it, but it is true. I'm very big on documents and spreadsheets and research and color coordinating and bullet points and Roman numerals and all this. Todd is not that way, but it kind of works because I feel I really thrive in terms of story structure and the flow of writing. Todd is really good at dialogue and thematic elements. And it's also nice to have someone else. I mean, I have written things on my own as well. And for the same reason, I like to get other people's feedback on it. It's good to have somebody so that it's not just a bunch of characters who are actually just different versions of you talking to each other. You want to make sure that it's not just a microcosm trapped in your brain.
Yeah, it's interesting that you mentioned some little kind of sort of hiccups along the way, because I understand one of them was the original investor, wasn't it? Because I think the project came together just kind of pre-COVID, and then the wheels kind of fell off, and they didn't have any money. So how did you guys overcome that?
Yeah, I mean, I love that you've done your research. Amazing, because you're right. That's exactly what happened. This guy came to us. His concept was the reason we wrote this movie. We worked on it for months and months, and then, like you said, COVID hit. Suddenly, he didn't have any money, and he pulled out. But Ray, by that point, our director, had completely fallen in love with the story and felt so passionately about wanting to make it and wanting to bring it to life that he basically just said, well, let's continue full steam ahead. I'll figure it out. And basically the production company that he and Randall Blizzard, the DP, have together, they do a lot of post-production work, which they were able to continue working throughout the pandemic because all their work was remote and like I said, post-production. And they do a lot of commercial work as well. So essentially their company took on a ton of jobs, just commercial work. Like they just took on a ton of like mind-numbing, soul-sucking jobs in order to plow forward and make it happen. And then the other way that we were able to make that work, there is debt involved on their end, but at the same time, we also shot in chunks. So we would get pieces at a time, which made it easier for their production company to self-finance it in a way. And then you might already know this, but the funny thing is that after we premiered at Fright Fest in London, the original investor that had dipped out came back and tried to buy the film. And Ray basically very kindly said, you can fund the next one. Because at this point, we really believe in it, and I would only sell it if I didn't believe in it. So, and we connected at Fright Fest with Dark Sky Films, who are distributing it now. So it all worked out in the end.
Yeah, and on the note of the investor's final word before we put that side of things to bed, has he seen the movie yet?
Oh, that's a good question. I'm not sure.
So I was just very interested to know whether or not he'd had like a sneak peek before anybody else, because he brought the project to the table. So
No. He definitely didn't have a sneak peek before anybody else, because by the time we were even filming, he was long gone and not involved at all. I want to say that he tried to come back after the premiere just because of how well it was being received at Fright Fest and how many festivals it got into afterwards and things like that. But I don't know, maybe he has seen it. I'm not sure. I wonder to what degree does he know that he's missing out? But well, there will always be another one. There will always be more.
Absolutely, absolutely. Now, in terms of the movie itself, there's a lot of fun kind of meta moments going on early on. Yeah. There's a little bit of banter going on at like one of the conventions, and there is, of course, as things move on, a much darker underbelly to the story, involving sort of toxic fandom and sorry, I'm having a senior moment, parasocial relationships.
Yeah.
And the latter, I would argue, has been around for probably as long as kind of celebrity has been around. But
absolutely.
But the advent of internet, and particularly social media, have made it far more prevalent now, right? It's really
Yeah.
it's invasive, isn't it? I think.
Yeah, I would agree with you, and because that's a really interesting point that parasocial relationships in one way or another have been around since the dawn of humanity. Well, or at least since we started making art, and even though it was theater and print work at the time. But I think you're right; it's always been around. It's just the internet, in particular, makes it so much more accessible. And now we're in this culture where we're used to having things immediate gratification, and we're used to having things right when we want them, and it makes everything seem within grasp and within reach. And I think you're right that it's not that it created this phenomenon. It's just exacerbates our ability to enact it.
Yeah, agree totally. Now, murder aside, obviously, or maybe there's something that that we don't. How much of your own personal experience um, about your experience within the industry or friends within the industry have helped to inform the screenplay? And I also wanted to ask you, I seem to recall that you'd said in one of your interviews, kind of post Fright Fest, that you'd also had like some close brushes with stalkers as well. Is that right?
Yeah, so I appreciate that you went ahead and got that out of the way, because I was going to go ahead and say I have not murdered anyone yet. And I don't want anyone to think that that's the part coming from reality. It's not, definitely not. But yeah, I did have one stalker scare at one point, and have certainly, like, I think a lot of female presenting people have certainly had brushes with, like, unwanted advances, even unwanted contact with my body. I'm a survivor of assault. Like, I've certainly been followed before a couple different times, or threatened in different ways. I mean, and that's a reality that a lot of people have to live with. And so I certainly wanted to draw from that. And I also wanted to draw from, I also live with depression and anxiety. And I think there's something to be said for, or something to be examined about, when we deal with any sort of neurodivergence, what it looks like if you don't have a good support system. Or, to address, like, what we were saying about social media, what happens when it feels like people are constantly looking at you, but no one's really seeing you, and you're more a thing to be consumed rather than a fully fleshed out human being who's only showing a curated portion of their life online and withholding the darkest parts from those around you. So I certainly wanted to draw from that in terms of my own experience, but then also, like you said, the other people I know. I mean, in the convention scene, Catherine Corcoran, who plays Dawn in Terrifier and is also one of my good friends in real life. We've been close ever since we made that movie together. That entire scene where we're talking back and forth at the convention was pretty much improv. I mean, those were everything that she was saying about, like, the blogs that have been made where people, like, enhance and, like, make her look fatter and, like, Photoshop her and stuff, and, like, make her feel really dysmorphic about her body. That's all stuff she's dealt with. Like, I can't take credit for that in the writing. She was bringing her lived experience to it. And there are so many people who can speak to that sort of thing. And I think, kind of like we nod to at the end of the film, there's this idea of, oh, if you're an actor, you always want attention, or if you're a performer or a content creator, you are begging for scrutiny all the time. And obviously, I'm sure that that's not the case. I mean, you're wearing an Amy Winehouse shirt. You're obviously familiar with, the perils of unstable mental health, and the perfect storm that comes with, a lack of boundaries, a lack of privacy, and people who feel a right to you and to your life as something objectifiable and commodifiable. I mean, she's the perfect example.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's such a tragic thing, and it must be incredibly frustrating from your perspective, and fellow artists, that you're doing something that you absolutely love, but there's this, and it is a minority of people that make it really hellish.
It is. It's definitely a minority. I mean, 90% of the horror community is absolutely wonderful, and the genre community, and of film nerds in general. Like, we all just love art, and there is a really beautiful community. And so this is those shown in the film are absolutely meant to be a minority, but the problem is that that minority is sometimes the loudest, right? I mean, speaking of Amy Winehouse, that's kind of her story. There's almost a nod to her story and stories like it at the end of Faceless After Dark, because there's kind of this thing of we collectively will look at people who were clearly in need of help and in their own way screaming for help, and something awful happens, and after the fact, outlets and the society at large will say like, oh, it's if only we could have known. But people who need help are typically begging for it in their own way, and I would argue that she was.
And
and then we commodify her story after the fact.
I mean, speaking from my own personal experience with depression, you don't always ask for it in the right way.
No.
So you're relying obviously on other people to try and sort of read between the lines a little bit. So it is a tricky thing, and that sees nicely, I think, into some of the smaller little kind of beats in the movie in terms of things that may be going on. We mentioned, one of the things I think is coming out is just to feel safe as well as a woman. And there's just little things like the scene where you walk into the lift and you've got a man standing behind you. It's everyday things that maybe from a male perspective you don't necessarily think about, but the movie really gets that point across well, that this is something that you guys live with day to day, and it's a genuine concern. And the other thing as well is that I picked up on the relationship with your character Jess in the movie, your girlfriend, and how she's very careful about how she is in public, introducing you as a friend as opposed to girlfriend. She's kind of compartmentalizing personal and private life. I mean, I know that yourself have been very open with your own sort of queerness, and not everybody's the same. And I'm guessing that this is obviously again something that you've experienced a lot with your sort of colleagues within the film biz.
Yeah, I mean, well, first of all, I love that you picked up on all these little things, because that's what I want. I want people to watch it a million times and then see new little things every time. And luckily, I've never been good at hiding who I am anyway, so I'm glad that I haven't been asked to. Maybe that's why. Maybe one informs the other. But I have seen it happen to other people. I mean, I remember reading a story where Kristen Stewart talked about how someone said to her before she came out, if you come out, like, we're probably not going to be able to get you into like a Marvel movie or a big superhero franchise or something.
Yeah.
No, and she basically said, okay, fuck you. So,
and rightly so.
Yeah. And rightly so. And like now she does these amazing weird indies, and like we're all better for it. But I've heard stories like that, and I'm sure you have too. And so it's interesting because like Jessica and Ryan, like the people around Bowie, are not meant to be villains. They're all doing what they feel like they have to do in order to move forward. And we all sort of feel like the ends justify the means. And it's not so much that these are decisions being made by the individuals, but it's a response to a greater pressure. I mean, even what you said about like speaking up about your own depression, I mean, men have a completely different struggle where it's hugely stigmatized for men to have a relationship with your mental health. And so asking for help is seen as weak, even though it's one of the strongest things you can do. And so it's all meant to be a reflection of like outside pressures, and there really isn't meant to be a villain in the story other than Bowie eventually. And some of the people who Bowie encounters, but it's certainly not meant to be the people in her life, even though they're still not doing a good job of seeing Bowie at the same time.
Yeah, I mean, but Bowie's journey as it goes on, it does create that little bit of internal conflict, because you're like, at one point, do you stop rooting for her because you understand why she's ultimately snapped and she's reacting in the way she is, but it's just like, how far do you go with that support? So that was quite an interesting thing to wrestle with as well.
That makes me so happy, because that's absolutely something I want people to ask themselves. Like, I got on this train, at what point do I get off? Because I think we're heading towards a cliff.
Yeah, some of us will stay for the whole journey and disappear.
I mean, I love it.
One of the things that I wondered was whether or not making this film was uh, a cathartic experience for you, being able to kind of put that all out there, and you know what I said earlier about kind of not just what you are dealing with, but women within the film industry and beyond. You know that they're having to deal with this on a daily basis, and it works exceptionally well on that level. Is that something
Thank
that you kind of got out of it?
Absolutely. It was hugely cathartic. I mean, and there are also things that, there are also struggles that some people have to deal with that I will never understand, like trans people and most global majority people, like there are so many experiences that I'll never understand at the same time, and that are even more intense. And but yeah, that being said, it was a huge catharsis in making it, because there have been a lot of films that I've been a part of that I'm hugely proud of. And then there have been some that I'm not as proud of. And that maybe, even if I like the product, that the experience of making them was not necessarily pleasant. And very often it's hard to feel a sense of autonomy and a sense of control. And so, I trusted Ray's vision as the director. And then at the same time, I felt like I had much more autonomy. Like if there was something I didn't want to do or that I really felt strongly about, he would very much listen to that and wanted me and everyone else involved to have a strong sense of ownership. Because also our crew was very diverse, lots of queer people, diverse racially in terms of experience and backgrounds and things like that as well. But yeah, I mean, there is a lot of, I'm obviously not going to go, well, maybe it's not obvious. I'm not going to go on a killing spree, like we said. And now I'm being almost defensive about it, and I feel like people aren't going to believe me. But there is a deep anger that I do have for a lot of the way the world works, and a lot of the way that either I've been treated or I see other people treated. And some of it also comes from just like my own, like one of my responses to depression is anger that I can't always control, and I've found ways through stunts and through martial arts and therapy, journaling, yoga, meditation. I've found ways to channel that. But Bowie is essentially, what would it look like if that anger was just unbridled, and if I just absolutely, someone who's essentially on a suicide mission, like knowing that they are going to use the cliff metaphor again, that they don't want to wait to get pushed off the cliff, they're going to jump like before anyone tries to push them. So there is something really freeing in exploring someone who's got nothing left to lose. Absolutely.
No, totally agree. Now, you mentioned stunts. That feeds nicely into a question that I'd had, because you are a multi-hyphenate in terms of filmmaking. You're an actor, you're a producer, you're director. In fairness, I got tired before I finished reading IMDb on how many jobs you have. But one of the coolest ones, like stunt credits 25. I'm like, who knew? And I mean, how did you become a stunt woman? What was it that you kind of loved about that?
Well, first of all, thank you. I've been doing martial arts ever since I was a kid. I think partially because of my need for emotional regulation, and also just so they would feel safer with me leaving the house. My parents put me in martial arts as a kid, and for other reasons as well, of like just they were working full time and I needed somewhere to go after school. But so I've been doing martial arts my whole life, and once I got into writing and acting and filmmaking, basically I had thought that stunts were, you jump off of a building or you're on fire or you jump off of a building while on fire. I never thought of stunts being a fight scene or wielding a weapon or just running or like a pratfall, things like that. And so once someone pointed out to me, I wish I could remember who it was. I was living in Los Angeles at the time, and I was training in Krav Maga at the time. Now I'm doing Muay Thai. But someone at the time said, those are stunts. Like what you're doing, what you do for fun, just as a workout for your mental health, those are stunts. And it blew my mind. And so I basically rebranded myself as an action actor, as an actor who does my own stunts. And so then I continued with the martial arts training, but then I also did a bunch of stunt specific training. I did some boot camps I've done like classes in, I got my motorcycle license for a film. I've done stunt driving courses and training in harnesses, wire work, and things like that. So I've just kind of rebranded, and ever since then, people have been hitting me with things and killing me in various ways.
That is so cool. And on that note, we've been told it's time to wrap. I could carry on talking to you about this for ages. It's been an absolute pleasure, Jenna, to meet you and to talk about the film. I wish you every success when it goes on release. And all being well, we'll have a chat about future projects soon.
I would love that. Thank you so much, Ashley, for all of your kind words and for your time. I really appreciate it.
You're most welcome. My pleasure.
I thought they were going to push me. So I jumped.
Would you believe me if I said it was self-defense?